Welcome to the podcast where together, every Monday, we explore hospitality in its very broadest sense. From culture and cooking, cocktails and coffee, nutrition and farming, politics and animal welfare, organic and sustainability, family and business, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. Come and learn with me, Mark Cribb, about where our food and our drink comes from, and the businesses and, more importantly, the human beings that thrive on where we decide to spend our time and our money. Sign up to our weekly newsletter at humansofhospitality.co.uk and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. Welcome to this week's episode, and sorry to all of you who noticed that last Monday we were episode 3, and in the 2.5 years or so of releasing these, I think I only missed a couple of weeks over Christmas. However, life is rather manic at the moment, and we are hurtling towards reopening day and refurbishing restaurants and recruitment and tech and general carnage dominating my life. I think we're going to be dropping to a show every other week rather than every week for a little while. Let me know your thoughts on that. If you have strong views either way, I'm always interested to hear from you. Contact form is at humansofhospitality.co.uk, where you can also sign up for what will now be the bi-weekly rather than weekly newsletter. And if you really want to motivate me to get back to weekly ASAP, the donation PayPal and Patreon button is also on the homepage. Thank you, you are lovely. Okay, on to this week's show. After too long in the early days in the southern part of the country, we are once again heading back to Scotland this week, off to meet Hamish Martin just outside Edinburgh. And Hamish is the kind of human I utterly love. A brave soul who at the age of 41, with his own business and a career working around the wine and the whisky trade, decided that his number one love in the world, apart of course from his family, was plants. Not only was he brave enough to sell the business, he was crazy enough to have no idea where his next adventure would take him. He pretty much let the plants decide. He went off on a learning journey, meeting an inspirational medicine man along the way. A dream and a country walk, and soon enough he'd stumbled across a beautiful plot of land not far from the city. Well, dilapidated and covered in weeds may have been a better description for most of us, but for Hamish it was a vision of beauty, and he convinced his wife, 4 kids and 5 dogs that they should live in a mobile home on the land and create something beautiful. Now he has a distillery and a cafe and a herb garden and an owl and an actual house and an incredible story to tell, along with products in M&S and Fortnum and Mason and many more places. Now, unlike most in hospitality, Hamish sees a herb as medicinal rather than culinary. His description of a dandelion will make you see the plant and the universe through new eyes. His willingness to go on a journey with no plan will inspire you to be brave and take risks and follow your heart, perhaps more than your head. He's also about to convince you to stop feeling guilty about not mowing your lawn enough, and that alone is a great reason to listen. Whatever you're doing, enjoy the image of Hamish and his owl in a treehouse overlooking his garden, yet still nailing being yet another wonderful human of hospitality. And if you want to hear more of these conversations, can you just do me one quick favour as well, please? Subscribe, rate and review the show. It's super helpful and it helps keep me motivated and when I really should be at work doing my actual job. But Hamish would certainly not be too supportive of that, so let's get over and meet him. Hamish Martin, co-founder of the Secret Herb Garden and the Secret Garden Distillery. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I spent a bit of time researching you yesterday, Hamish, and I fell in love with you and your business. I even downloaded a copy of the Secret Garden book to listen to on Audible when I'm driving up to Scotland in the summer this year. So really looking forward to having a chat. But before we get going, where in the world are you, Hamish?
Well, thank you for the intro. I'm sitting currently in my study in a house which we built on site, which is the Secret Herb Garden, and we're located just outside Edinburgh, at the foot of the Pentland Hills, in a sort of 7.5 acre herb nursery garden.
Wow, it looks absolutely incredible. I say this probably at the start of all of these podcasts of late, because I used to go and do them all face to face, and then COVID came along, so I've had to learn to record remotely. But yeah, God, I wanted to come and sit in that garden when I was looking at the pictures of it online yesterday. It looks absolutely beautiful. So you are literally, I think probably obsessed is the word, by herbs and plants, to the extent that I understand you've grown 600 of them yourself. So I thought maybe to start with, Hamish, you could just go through all 600 and let me know the key attributes of. No, we won't. We won't. We won't do that. But that's quite impressive. But it is hard to know where to start in many ways, because you've got a shop, a distillery, a herb nursery, veg garden, you run events, weddings, so much more. But I guess the backdrop to all of that is your love of plants. So if it's okay, we'll start there. And I'm just wondering, when was it you decided that you sort of, you wanted a life change and you wanted your future to revolve around plants? Well, when was that? And what was the trigger that led you to sort of start studying botanicals?
Wow, it's a really good question. Well, I used to go back, I say another life. I used to have a wine business in Scotland called Inspirational Vaults, which I started with my father, who sadly passed away about 20 years ago. But I'd been, though I loved the wine trade because it was involved with the grapes and the growing, but I'd always had my first plot of land, a small, tiny piece of land when I was 20, to start growing. I've always been addicted with hill running, wild swimming, being outdoors, wild camping, all that sort of bivy bagging and all that sort of stuff. But I spent from 91 to gosh, I get years so confused. 12 years ago, and I built Inverarity up, and obviously supplying the hotels and restaurants of Scotland and also down in England a lot, with fine wine. But I really sort of lost the soul of it, building a business for the sake of building a business. And my real passion was in growing the plants that I'd been spending so much of my free time doing and being outside. And I thought, you know what, if I don't change my life now, I never will. And actually, I went through a big change in my life at that point anyway. And it was right. I'm doing it, and it was a very sort of big cut-off thing. And ended up selling in Variety Vaults, now in Variety Morton's up here. And I retrained at the Botanic Gardens, the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh for 2 years, and became a herbologist. And I travelled quite a bit and worked with a medicine man, I suppose you call him a medicine man, in North America, and a witch doctor in South Africa, to really understand plants. And it's not until you sit at the feet of somebody truly connected to nature that you learn to shut up and listen. And I had no idea where the path was going to take me in any respect. All I knew was that I want to spend the rest of my life with herbs, specifically herbs. And it was a leap of faith. To do it, but I'm not sure if that even answers your question. But
But it does. I love it though. I love the fact that that you just sort of made that decision. It seems like a calling, and the more we hear about how much you now do with plants, I've got to ask, a medicine man in North America. That sounds fascinating. What was involved there?
He is remarkable. He's an old gentleman now. It's called Wolf. If I try and he's written some books actually. I've got them obviously in my study here. It's all about medicine wheel, working with nature. Basically, it's quite a hard school of learning. It's not sort of any books and words. It's more physical actions outside and understanding the communication that you can have with the outside world. And of course, it's an ancient system. Obviously, we've lost the connection in our modern world, but actually, it's still very vibrant in obviously big communities in the world. This sort of connection with nature, and really, it was just to learn more about that. So he very much taught me a lot more about the connection of nature and how to commune with nature. And the witch doctor in South Africa was phenomenal, man. He was all about how to work with plants. He was just specifically medicine with plants. And that's what I'd studied. And I grow herbs, but I don't grow herbs. I grow herbs because of, a lot of people think, oh, herbs, especially in the hospitality trade, they'll think, oh, herbs are nice culinary aromatic plants. And our wild herbs are actually good for nature. The definition of a herb for me is it's medicinal, full stop. So when you look at plants as medicinal and you look at our own indigenous plants, that means chickweed, ground elder, dandelion, oak, elder, it means it opens the door to every indigenous, our wild plants, even more so. So my whole path has been to aim for more information and work with plants as a medicinal on a medicinal level.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I think I would love that adventure. I've just I remember what started this. I think I did an interview with somebody on mushrooms and had no idea about the sort of the mycelium under the ground and how connected everything is. And then that took me down the rabbit hole of trees. And I just read a book called Overstory. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
No. Well, with it. So it's a fiction book, but it's fundamentally about, I suppose, how the growth of trees put the sort of the context of our time on Earth and generations in context. But I just find it amazing how connected nature is. So yeah, I think I would love to go on that sort of adventure and journey. Was there any key things you learned from either of those two guys that really sticks in your memory that maybe sort of reaffirmed that decision for you to have that sort of life change? Anything that really jumped out and you went, wow, that's incredible. I'm so glad I'm on this adventure.
I think there's two things to it. One, you have to go quite deep in yourself. And secondly, is making sure that you aren't following any uh, rules, any known science rules, etc. It's all about the key word is imagination to be able to unlock the opportunity. So I find science quite restrained. Yeah, we live in a world now where we can't move because of science, etc. Don't get me wrong. I believe in living in a balanced life, taking science and taking plants, and somewhere in between is the balance. Um, but this science that we talk about, and how now science knows that trees communicate together, etc., this is brand new science. No, it's not. This has been known by indigenous peoples for millenniums. We're just very backward when it comes to, we think we're brilliant on science, but actually when it comes to that inner communication that happens, it's not just underneath the soil where trees are helping to feed one another if one's ill, and the whole communication with the mushrooms and the spores, it happens on plants as well. There is a communication with plants and I'm not wearing my sandals now. I'm meant to be talking about, but there's an inner communication and a vibration that happens on a rock, on a in the waters, in the trees, in the flowers. It's all around us. It's a thin veil just to be able to then have a look underneath and then have that communication with it. So um, I find that bit about science. I'm reading a beautiful book at the moment, um, written by a German chap about how science is now catching up with all the sort of inner workings of trees and how they work in a family unit, etc., etc. But that's been known for a very, 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 very long time. We're just trying to catch up, I think.
Yeah, it seems crazy that we used to have all of that knowledge and we lost it. Have you looked into, why did that happen? How did we go from being so knowledgeable and in touch with nature to now being so far removed? And hopefully we're at a turning point and we're going to reestablish that connection. I use the word hopefully, but yeah, do you know how we lost it? It just seems incredible that we did.
I think you've got to go back to things of Incas and native, indigenous peoples. They've still got it, thank goodness. Well, not the Incas, obviously, but yeah, I think this is only from me personally. I think obviously it comes from power and greed, and being invaded by Spaniards or the Brits for starters. Then just add. I mean, don't get me going on to the religion. I don't think it's obviously a lot of people feel very strongly about that, but Christianity and most religions have a way of controlling and fear basing everything. So you have to go very further back to see where there was a freedom of communication there, and that communication was working on the female and male power, not where we see it now. Every religion is male dominated. It's all about control, really, I think, and controlling and making sure people do as they're told, and so therefore get them to live in fear. And I think that it's the same with herbal medicine now and pharmaceuticals. It's been well documented how pharmaceutical trades, they don't want you to know that you can go out there and heal yourself with plants, because you'd rather go to Boots and buy your chemicals. So it's there's a balance to everything, but it's a very deep question, and that you could have probably, that's a real debate. And from my perspective, it comes from a disconnection that has been forced upon us.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I could probably spend an hour talking about that alone. In fact, I am going to make sure that I do come up and sit in that garden and have a gin and tonic with you at some point, Hamish. But I guess we'll come back to the plant side. But let's go a little bit on the business side. So, brave decision to make that change. How old were you when you basically decided to sell your last business and go on a different route?
41.
41. Okay.
Now
And
53 to next month.
yeah, excellent. Okay. And when I say brave decision, I guess because, am I right in saying there was no real sort of financial plan? There was no sort of idea how this was going to lead into a business. This was just really to go and spend some time doing something you were fascinated by.
Yes. No, I just have to trust. And it's nerve wracking.
Yeah,
That
I bet.
was 3 kids, and I was renting a flat in Edinburgh. Had no idea where I was going to go and how I was going to make it work. So there was quite, it's a matter of sort of trusting, really, in the sort of the path that you take.
Yeah, well, I love it. As somebody, I'm sure there's lots of people who are working in hospitality who certainly in the last 12 months have thought, I need to do something else. It's time to find a different direction, and that can be hard to do. So well done for being brave enough to just take the leap. Having said that, I'm very excited about what's to come, hopefully for hospitality this year, and I think we've come out well. But we'll come back to that. So, talking about the Secret Herb Garden, so you're just outside of Edinburgh, which must be an amazing location to have such a wonderful city right on your doorstep. Can you just explain to me how you came about finding that space,
Yeah, of
please?
course. I mean, as I said, we were renting in Edinburgh at that time, and we were desperate to get out of town. Um, and I went to look at a cottage at the road end down here, but the cottage wasn't right. But as I drove up this single track road, I saw this huge derelict glass house, and I thought, wow. So I got out, jumped over the fence, stood at the doorway of this derelict glass house. And I mean, when I say derelict, I mean smashed, concave roof. I'm not going to say weeds, they was filled with wild plants. And as I stood there, I had a deja vu of my night's dream in its entirety. And I could see the peaches, the figs, the vines in its entirety. I thought, right, guys, I hear you, I get it. And I left my mobile number with the next door neighbor. And 9 months later on, we get the keys to this 7.5 acre derelict plot. It had been used for a place called Dam Head Organics. So they used to grow organic vegetables way ahead of their time, actually. Unfortunately, it'd gone bust after 25 years, and it remained derelict for 8. So the land hasn't been. I don't use. I mean, it's another thing I can tell you. We don't use any chemicals, not even organic. So the land here has been, wholly untouched for nearly 40 years. So I do remember when we got the keys, I had to sort of break the good news and bad news that time to the 3 kids. And it was good news and bad news, guys. Good news is we found somewhere to live. Bad news is no house. So we lived in a static caravan for 3 years with then 4 kids, 5 dogs. And it took us 2 years to convert this derelict piece of land into the secret herb garden. And then eventually, obviously, we built a house on site. But it was definitely a challenge, and I loved it. We made the static caravan very homely, and it was a great project to get my teeth stuck into, and Liv's, because Liv, my wife, was, her passion is vintage furniture, which she calls it vintage furniture, and the cafe. And so it was really a culmination of 2 dreams coming together as one. And the Secret Herb Garden was purely a green space. We wanted to create a space where people can come, irrelevant if you're 3 years of age running around, or you're 92 being pushed in a wheelchair, or you're breastfeeding. This was a green space that would allow people to come and enjoy. The glass house is beautiful. Obviously, I'm biased, but it's about half the size of a football pitch and filled with, some of your listeners will know, we've got Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, the champagne grapes, and everything else growing in there. So it's a bit like a jungle there. But that was the real idea of it, was to create this green space. And we're not out, when you can still catch a bus and come to us. So we're not out of town and we're not in town. We're sort of in between these two worlds. So it is a wonderful space of that. And I suppose really the weddings, we never intended to become a wedding venue, etc. But when people came, we got so many people saying, "Oh my goodness, we'd love to get married here. Can we get married here?" It was like, "All right, okay." So the wedding business really grew to become one of the top 10 wedding venues in Scotland at that point. And we just got rated by the Sunday Times as one of the top 30 garden centres. God knows why, because we're pretty rustic, but a lovely thing to be voted for. Um, yeah, and then
Amazing. Yeah, I guess you're very unique. Sorry to butt in. So, was your wife surprised that, I don't know, at one point you had your own business, and then a couple of years later you were all living in a mobile home on a bit of land that, as you say, wasn't surrounded by weeds, but to lots of people might have looked like it was. Well, did that come as a bit of a shock? Because that's I lived in a caravan with my kids for 6 months on my driveway when we were renovating our house, and that was tough. But she was supportive, presumably.
very supportive. I think glad to get out. I mean, she did get pneumonia. I mean, in living in the static it was a challenge, especially we had a new baby as well. So, it was really crowded, but I loved it. And I remember when we built a house, it was like, oh my God, we've got a mortgage again. Uh,
Yeah.
and that was a big wake up call, because you've got to sell a lot of cups of coffee and lots of plants for a grown up house again. And that's when I decided we launched with the distillery, because um, I've I'm a great believer, if you're working with plants, that there's no limitation to working with plants. Your only limitation is your imagination. So therefore, limitless imagination, limitless possibilities. And I'd created this gin that turned pink from our rose petals. I had a little 3 litre still. I said I was in the wine business, but also was in the whiskey business previously in Variety. My old man, it's another story. So I've spent my life surrounded in the booze trade. So it was a bit of fun to make this pink gin at home just for us. And my wife said, that thing you do with the gin and the roses, I think you might have to make a business. And it was like, oh, no, I don't want to go back into the booze trade. But I'm not in the booze trade. I'm in the booze trade, telling people how amazing plants are. And so I'm coming at an angle about the botanics that's in the gin. And anyway, we didn't have any money, but managed to get 3 people to invest, and we converted the barn into an ATEX rated still room, and went live with the business in, I get my years so confused, 2017 October. We called it the Old Curiosity Distillery then, only because the barn that we emptied was so full of Libs's stock, and it was like walking into a sort of curiosity shop. But we're changing the name to the Secret Garden Distillery now. And we're just really lucky, to be honest with you, Mark, that, we've come to the gin market. And even back in 17, I said, oh, come on, there's too many gins. Nobody wants any more gin. God. But I didn't have any other tricks up my sleeves. I've been growing the botanics to make herbal teas. We make honey. But we really needed something that could, move forward with the business. And so we did. And my eldest daughter came on board with me. Right at the very beginning to help me with, as you guessed from the beginning, I'm not great with IT. So she's done all the social media events and gin clubs and everything like that. So it's been lovely to work with her and grow the business. And now we're employing 24 people within, just on the gin business itself at the moment. So, and obviously we'll probably touch on it, tough times for everyone. But yeah, so it's been a real roller coaster. And the reason why I'm still here is because of you shouldn't get me going with questions, Mark. I'm really sorry.
No, don't worry.
Is because of these roses. It's not any one rose that we grow. It's a rose called Apothecary Rose. So it's the oldest rose known to man. There was a body dug up and carbon dated 5,000 years ago. One girl holding a bunch of apothecary roses. This apothecary rose has been central to so many religions and so many peoples, that it was a rose that when we planted the garden, there's another whole story why I did, and I'm not going to bore you with that. But I planted a lot of them to the point that we have the largest plantings of apothecary rose in the UK, and I grew it just to make a lovely, beautiful herbal tea. But if I hadn't done that rose and hadn't created the gin, I can guarantee you we wouldn't still be able to be here. There's no way. So the roses really saved the day, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And one of your lovely sort of descriptions that I read was that you feel almost a passenger in this journey, and that with not having a business plan, it's almost like the ideas are happening for you. And I suppose going a little bit back to what some people might say is our sort of slightly hippie start to this conversation, I suppose, does it very much feel like, yeah, that this is literally just happening, and the ideas and the concepts, you're being guided, I suppose, through this journey.
I completely feel like a passenger. Completely, a passenger that for me, I only have one goal, one objective, and that is to communicate to people. Whether you're a child and I do a fairy magic herbal walk for you here, or you're a very keen gardener, or you're a mixologist. I only have one drive, and it's really to highlight how beautiful nature is, how amazing she is, and how we can work with her without having to fill the earth with a whole lot of chemicals. And so I know I'm digressing.
No, no. This is why I fell in love with you when I was reading a bit.
But
Sorry, go on.
yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, I could get carried away with that whole piece, but I definitely feel like I'm a passenger in this. And both Libs and I are really badly dyslexic, which which I think is a gift. So um, we're not good on fine for ideas, etc. But also when you start working with, and again, I'm honestly not wearing sandals, but when you start working with plants, and people ask, how did you come up with lavender and echinacea and pink elderflower and jasmine and these things for the gins and things? I didn't. That's the fact. Gave it no thought process whatsoever. They just make it so abundantly obvious that really you couldn't choose anything else, and there's none of this sort of trials and testing, etc. It's like, oh wow, yeah, that would be wonderful, and we grow it, and therefore it will work really well. So I am having to put a business plan together now, though, which has been a right bugger. But
You need to delegate that by the sounds of it, Hamish. You need to have someone who does that bit.
well, yeah. So we are trying to, because I'm putting in a plan to build, upgrade the distillery on the same footprint, but make it much more sustainable, eco-friendly. We're putting a borehole for water, except So I am having to put a plan together, which seems so ironic, really, for me, having to put, like, they want a 3-year plan and things like that. Who the hell knows what's happening in 3 years? But yeah, so I'm trying to get a little bit more focused because I'd like to upgrade the distillery and the packaging and everything, but that's another thing.
Yeah. Well, and it sort of sounds slightly. Oh, I would say it's a great sales pitch, but you're almost underselling yourself because your gin is in. I think I'm right in saying it's in Harrods, Harvey Nichols, Selfridges, M&S, John Lewis. That's a pretty impressive thing to sort of pull off when you just let the plants do the talking on a little plot outside Edinburgh. Does that come from your background in the booze business that you alluded to, or how did you go about getting the recognition to get stocked in those kind of venues?
When I was because when I was in the wine business, food business here, it's Scotland based. We were wine merchants, and we did own label whiskey. We did do own label whiskey for the Wine Society and some people down south and the Ritz and things. But I never sold to Harrods or etc. Before. So that was just me saying, look, here's a product that has no sugars, no colorings, no flavorings. It's just the plants. And one or two of them can turn pink. I mean, we've got about 20 different flower petals that all have this anthocyanin which change color, which isn't what I want to be known for. It's really the botanics that I want to sing about. But yeah, I've been very lucky, I think is the word. We got into M&S and did an own label for them, a white label for them, purely because one of the buyers came to a wedding here. And it was her husband that said, "Oh, my wife's one of the buyers, and she's going back to work," and that was it. You can't, you couldn't you couldn't, write that out in a book, to get that sort of break right at the very beginning. In fact, we make a non-alcoholic, so there's a non-alcoholic G&T premix and everything, which we make for M&S as well. And it's all plant distillate, so it's something I've been doing for or something that's been done for years. We like to make this non-alcoholic thing a new.
Yeah, the new craze. Yeah,
It's absolutely not. It's water distillates that have been done for millennia again. But we make one, and our non-alcoholic has no chemicals, no preservatives in it. What a bit of a risk, if I'm going to be honest with you. but it goes to the same ethos here. So we'll probably talk about the food and things later, but I am adamant about having no chemicals, etc. in it. So we made this not the non-alcoholic spirits, with juniper distilled and coriander, but we distill them all separately. Anyway, that's another thing. Into this non-alcoholic and thinking, well, my God, if we could get 3 months shelf life, that would be great. But there's no commerciality to that. But anyway, short of it is we've just got an 18-month shelf life, which nobody can understand how we've managed to. I actually can't understand it, but the plants seem to be okay with it. So, we've managed to get a long shelf life with no potassium sorbates and other chemicals that's in every other non-alcoholic product.
Amazing. And you're absolutely in the sweet spot of why I love having these conversations, is that this sort of idea of these humans of hospitality, that everybody's got their thing and everybody's got their niche. And if you tried to, with so many of the people I speak to, I guess if you tried to sort of justify it via the bean counters approach and the business plan and the numbers people, it would be so difficult. But I think when you focus down on that detail, and the reason that clearly your product is in so many of these incredible places is because you just get right back into the core ingredients, don't you, into those botanicals, and you start there, and you don't start with the end in mind, I suppose. You just go, I want to grow incredible botanicals, and the rest comes about, which is I think is brilliant. Just to go back a little bit though to the story of the secret herb garden. When you first opened that, what were you doing? Were you selling? Were people coming in and buying herbs? Was that the idea of it? Because I know that the distillery has sort of in many ways rescued you, and I'm sure even more so in the pandemic, which we'll come back to. But that original idea, was it literally people can rock up? Was this a sort of pay to come in and have a look around the garden or buy a herb, or was the cafe there straight away, or did that evolve later?
Cafe and herb nursery open together. So the garden's always been free for everybody to come in. This is what's the heartbreaking about that. I just, not to let people. It's like a ghost town, our garden. But anyway, the idea was just to offer green space. Come buy herbs. We're not a garden centre that will do you. I don't want any artificial plants, any hybrids, or any. It's our wild indigenous and the herbs that we do, and that's it. So there's, I don't know. We've got 22 different times, 55 different mints, I don't know, 9 different lavenders, etc., etc. So you can go and just potter around the plants that are for sale. There was all vintage garden tools. Actually, when we opened, people said, "Oh, you're just like Petersham Nursery," and we never knew what Petersham Nursery was, but we did make a beeline for it. We are, but we're. I mean, it's very. I think that it's beautiful what they have, and I suppose aspirationally, yes. But we're also a garden, a very big garden that has that. We've got 30 hives on site and a bee observatory, all these sort of things for people to come. There's no swings and no roundabouts, no children's play areas. This is a place where children need to use their imagination. There's enough places like that for soft play and anything. This is green open space. Crack on, get on with it, go out, explore. And we've got an old beaten up taxi that's there if kids want to go and use imagination. But it's a space to really just connect with, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So, when people who are coming in and buying those herbs, are this generally people who want a little herb garden that they can just use it in their food, or are they getting inspired that, like you say, so many gardens I suppose are full of hybrids and artificial plants and stuff. You can literally plant up a whole garden just using, I suppose, older native heritage kind of plants. Can you?
Yeah. I mean, basically, it's here. People, I mean, the amount of parsleys and the normal herb, rosemaries and thymes and oreganos and basil. Yeah, we sell stacks of those. But my real angle is we have a whole section. Actually, I've just put the plant list on the website, on the Secret Herb Garden and the distillery website. We've got pretty chuffed. Here we are in February, nearly into March, and we've got a really good list of plants. We've worked hard at this. But then you've got all the wild plants, from Teasel, St. John's wort. I can't even tell you. I tried selling dandelions. People really didn't take to that. But I mean, anyway, yes, dandelions is a completely different story. I mean, it's probably my favourite plant of all of them. But there we go.
Which most people would dig up and call a weed, presumably.
No, even worse than that. They wouldn't even dig it up. They'll poison it. to
Oh,
poison the earth that's around it. I saw an advert once that nearly brought me to tears. It's for a Roundup, and it was off this garden fence, and one guy, quite a sort of overly weight chap, sweating away, digging out, dandelions, and another chap over the fence in the pristine suit with a backpack of spray on his back, spraying at one dandelion. I just thought, what messaging are we giving? What are we telling people? Um, so yes,
it's a bit depressing. So I'm sat here in my house looking out at my garden, which is sort of full of weeds, but not weeds, sorry. What am I supposed to call them? Native plants. My lawn, but not by design, just because, well, clearly by nature design rather than my design. What's the answer to people who want a nice lawn? Is that an oxymoron? Should a lawn be full of all these different sort of wild plants, and should we just chill out and
I
yeah?
think you have to, if you want a lawn, have a bit that's for a lawn. Don't make the whole thing a lawn. It's just not. It's not natural. Yes, we all like to have a nice piece of grass to lie on. I actually like letting moss come in because it's even softer. Um, but don't get over. I mean, having daisies in a lawn is just so beautiful. I mean, they're called bruisewort. Right, hang on. I must stop talking about individual plants. The answer to that is relax. I remember I did some BBC Gardeners Question Times, and there was, people were phoning. So I've got yarrow growing in my lawn. What should I do? And one of the guys said, who likes using chemicals, spray it with X, Y, and Z. Another one who was organic said, put boiling water on it. And I said, for goodness sakes, you've got one of the most beautiful native plants growing in your lawn. You need to rejoice. And I could tell you so much what you can. In fact, actually, with yarrow, I've actually managed to sneak yarrow. Probably shouldn't say this in your podcast, into the M&S non-alcoholic. It's in my non-alcoholic. I use it in our wild gin. It's a beautiful plant. It won't be on any botanical database that you'll be allowed to use, but it's been used for, again, millennia as a plant, and the flowers are so aromatic. So if you've got dandelions growing in your lawn, I cultivate dandelions as part of a crop because it's one of the earliest pollens for our bees. So I actually I actually wait till they go to seed head and then get the tractor out on a high cut. So I'm forcing all the seed heads back down onto the soil to try and help have as many dandelions as possible.
Right.
So
Well,
relax and have a wild area in your garden. Please have a wild area in your garden.
it's another reason to love you, the fact that I don't have to go out and weed my lawn anymore.
No,
Hamish, to be honest, I did actually start last year by leaving a strip, but I think I've definitely lost the battle, if it is a battle. But not anymore. Now I'm going to embrace them and love them and tell my wife that they're all part of nature's beauty. I know you've got a real interest in this sort of the healing powers of plants and herbs. Are there any particular stories or any particular herbs that that you've now incorporated within your diet because you just think that what they do is particularly incredible?
Lots. I mean, for example, lemon verbena is a lovely plant. It's not native to us, but I grow. Well, we make a lemon verbena gin. It's not meant to be as a plug, but I've always grown it as it's a beautiful tea. So I made, as an example, I made a lemon verbena tea for obviously my wife and my middle daughter last night with honey before bed, and it's just such a relaxant for them. Um, Yesterday, Libs would take her elecampane and echinacea root tincture, which I make for her, which is obviously to sort of help combat, she's had pneumonia and things. And then really, it's all about, you don't have to internalize plants, but it does help to internalize them. But to another level, sweet peas. Now, technically, these are not herbs, but I can guarantee you the amount of times that I have picked some sweet peas, especially to anybody that visits us, and I see them in a wheelchair and they're elderly, and I will just give them a little handful of sweet peas. Joking apart, they nearly always there's tears welling in their eyes because that smell will bring back memories to them, and the olfactory system is part of that healing process. And so, who's to say sweet peas aren't a herb just because they're not listed as a herb? I can guarantee you they're a herb because they can uplift people by their smell, that can change their moods. Now, that's medicine. So I can't pick any one plant. I mean, if I pick one plant as a favorite, I pick the dandelion as my favorite herb though we may grow 600 different herbs. And I tell this to children. So I do these fairy herbal walks and things. And I'll pick a dandelion flower, and I'll hold it up to the sky, and I'll say, right, guys, what does this look like? It's round, and then, there's blue sky behind you. It's round, it's yellow, it's the blue sky. What's it look like? The sun. You'd be amazed how slow adults are at doing this. And then I'll go and pick the seed head, and the seed head of a dandelion is, you probably blew clocks with it when you were little, and it's that round circular seed head, so beautiful. I'd pick one of those, and imagine a nighttime sky. What does it look like now? It's silvery, it's round, and it's in a night sky. The moon. And then I said, right, keep that nighttime sky, and I'll blow the seed heads. And what do they look like? The stars. So here is one wildflower that is the sun, the moon, the stars, all wrapped up into give you the universe. I can write a book about one of all the good things that dandelions can do. Very quickly, you turn it upside down. If you've got kids, it's called the dent. It's called the dent of the lion's teeth because it looks like lion's teeth. It's a diuretic. It's brilliant digestive system. It's also a bitter, the leaves. So we do completely wild salads here. So yes, when it comes to one plant, very difficult. I love them all, but I probably use dandelion as my lead plant, and tell kids when you see it growing in the pavement, go shake your mum and dad's arm and say, look, the universe is smiling at me. I'm loved. And that plant is so tenacious, so strong, and such a giver. It's amazing. You can make henna tattoos from the sap. Anyway, I'm going on. Sorry, Mark.
Oh, it's beautiful. No, I love it. What a great description that was. Do you think you will write a book at some point?
I'd love to. Yeah, I really would love to. You won't believe me, but I'm building a treehouse at the moment as my new office.
I believe anything you say, to be honest.
I had to get planning permission because it's so high up. And underneath it's going to be the aviary for my owl, because at the moment we both share the same office. But I would like to think that once I get in there and create some space, I'd love to write a book. I'd love to, but I don't know where. It will happen at some point, definitely.
What spot to do it? Sat in a treehouse overlooking that. That'd be amazing. So you mentioned the owl then. So where did the owl come from, Hamish? Is this Rue?
It's just called Rue, yeah, which is after a beautiful plant again. Actually, all the dogs and all the kids, apart from the two boys, are named after plants. Well, I get up very early from March the 21st to end of October normally. I go up the Pentlands, and there's a pool, a wild pool, which I go swimming, and I'm up there about sort of 5 every morning. And that's my space in the morning. And one morning I found a little tawny owl, and I know you're not to touch them because they can just fall out of the nest and climb back. But this one, its eye was completely puffed out. Anyway, so we brought it home, and it had ruptured its eye. Took it to the vets, got in touch with Falconry Society, etc., and we decided to see if we could get her to get better. And she was putting weight on, and I just fell in love. We all fell in love with her. And then unfortunately, her other eye ruptured, which we think might have been chemicals, actually, well, the vet thinks. Even though she was still putting weight on, none of the vets were willing to, and I can understand that, willing to keep her going because she was a wild bird, and no chance of trying to rewild her now that she was completely blind. So she had to be put down, and really upset by that. And the falconry chaps that one of them was actually in charge of the Scottish Falconry Society, and put a WhatsApp note out, or whatever one does, and somebody literally 2 weeks later said, "I just had a hatching of spotted eagle owls. Would your friend be interested in having an eagle owl?" And it was like, yes, please. I always intended to have a bird of prey. It's funny as well, actually, because I always, if I ever go to a game fair, I always completely get drawn to them. And I've had, I don't know, maybe 3 days of falconry things paid for birthday presents and everything else. And I never went. I never went once because you never find the time. Or before, you never found the time. And then this lockdown, obviously, there's no excuse. I'm here now. And I'm so glad I did it then and not waited until a time in my life was quieter, because we read that they can live for 20 years, and actually some of them in captivity can live up to 40 years. So if I hadn't done it then, you know, I don't think, we probably wouldn't have had the chance to do it. So it's been the most, and I'm not a normal falconer. And I've got, I know a couple of people that very well that keep, well, one actually has about sort of 12 birds of prey. I am completely, I don't think there's anybody else that does what we do. She's in my office now. She has full reign of the house. She has an outdoor aviary. But she's comes everywhere with me. So I suppose, the only place when we were able to go out is we've got great friends that own Monocle Moor, Tom and Lisa. So as a hotel, so I know that we know them so well, so they're okay for us to turn up with 5 kids and 4 dogs and an owl. I don't think there'll be many other hotels that would be willing to put up with us coming. But I call her my teacher, to be honest with you, Mark. She really makes me, she's helped me to be grounded. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're on camera now. The last one I think I said was I was just on a Zoom meeting and she just decided to fly onto my shoulder. So it does make some of these Zoom meetings very interesting. And people suddenly say, "What was that in the background?" I thought, "Don't worry about it. That's my owl."
Yeah, brilliant. It's very Harry Potter-esque, I think. But I'm actually envious of that owl. I think I'd like to come and just follow you around for a few years, Hamish. I think it would be fascinating. I've got to come back to the business side a little bit, remembering that this is fundamentally about hospitality and the links, I guess. So I just want to touch on the cafe a little bit, because am I right in saying that you ran the cafe yourselves for most of the time, but recently you've partnered up with for your restaurant? Is that correct? And can you just explain
Yeah,
the
definitely.
decision process for that?
Well, putting so much energy into the distillery, and Liv's and wife, we've got two, the younger 2 children, and running the cafe, running the distillery, running the garden is a lot. Um, and we always feel that there was a lot more we could do with the cafe, but we just weren't able to deliver that. And Scott, I've known Scott for years, since he set up, when he set up, God, my brain's so bad, his first restaurant, which will come to me. I've loved his food. We used to supply a lot of the restaurants with herbs and odd vegetables, but we would in Edinburgh alone, but I would supply maybe about 20 restaurants, and obviously Scott was one of them. And I love his food. I love his cooking. It's a lot of forage stuff, obviously. And he just loves the no chemicals whatsoever. And we approached them to take on the cafe and the weddings, and we do these full moon dinners, etc. And so, yeah, they took it on in February. Talk about the worst timing ever. But
Wow. Yeah, literally just a few weeks before lockdown.
oh, absolutely, Mark. I mean, but we, really want to support them. So we have a whole veg garden. And I said, look, lockdown, I'll get the garden all up and running for you, just so whenever it opens, you can bring the veg, have your own gardener in there, or he can go over to you. But we did. So we've got the most beautiful veg garden for him, which again, which was good that I did it, because I just make sure the guy is brilliant. He understands the ethos, no chemicals, nothing. I'll use a plant to heal a plant. So you're growing real veg with and salads, and they are growing salads and things that gets for the cafe. Let's just go for normal times when he did have the cafe open and he had his restaurant open. It was beautiful, and his chefs are absolutely, well, they love being in the garden. I love watching these guys in whites for a cafe. We never had that, you're in jeans and t-shirt, but, going out and absolutely harvesting what they want to harvest at that time. That's been really lovely. And it just builds on the whole ethos of what the garden's about. It is, there's no chemicals. It is, work hand in hand with nature, and put it onto your plate, or drink it as a tea, or drink it as a gin, or use it as a soap. You know, let's use the botanics without having to put anything in them, and see how wonderful they are in their own basis. So we don't know when. Well, we just got our roadmap yesterday. God only knows.
Pretty vague, wasn't it, in Scotland from
Terrible, Mark. I was really hoping that we could open the garden shop and the plants, for Mother's Day, because I've worked so hard to make sure we've got so much stock of plants, but I just don't know now. And you were talking about the bean counters. If you were a bean counter and you look at our business model for the distillery as well, you'd be going, "You're insane."
Yeah, well, yeah,
We've
lots of people.
got
Yeah.
5 full-time gardeners, 2 full-time harvesters, and we do all our own bottling, labeling, absolutely everything ourselves. Whereas I've seen business models that they've got their distillery and brilliant brands that have their distillery in the warehouse, and that's it. They ship the gin to bottlers, they get it bottled, they ship it out full strength, and it's out and done.
So
Um,
boring.
I'm a bit envious of that because people look at the price points of our gin and go, "Oh my God, you're so expensive," and I just cannot be bothered to try and
Yeah.
explain. Look, this is I know I have to, but I tell you actually the biggest difference. And you mentioned coming to the garden. We get people to come to the garden. Mark, is a job done. It doesn't matter. We did so much with Montpellier Group, and we've had the guys up from Inception Group to some of the best Balmoral Hotel, etc., etc. They come here, or the buyers from Harvey Nicks or whatever. They come here and they see it, and then it's like, oh right, I get it. You're hand harvesting these botanics. You're putting them in the drying room. Then, you come into our gin lounge so we can do these gin garden tours. There's nowhere that can do this. And it's not that we're growing the potatoes to make the spirit. I always call that, we use a neutral grain spirit, which we have to buy in. But I always say that's like a painter being given a blank canvas. You don't normally ask about the canvas. It's a white canvas, and the color and the texture comes from all of the botanics that you add into that. And your white canvas has to be as clean and as stable as possible. And so therefore, we don't make our own grain, but we do put the color and the texture on it by all our own botanics. We've got 4,000 junipers growing here. You've got it's hard to explain, and yes, I don't think we're brilliant at explaining what we're really.
I think you. I think if people want to make the effort, and this is why this will be great. I think because in less than 60 minutes, people can get an essence, I suppose, of just that love and that attention. But no, I very much, it was easy for me to find out yesterday and get a real gist for just how much love and care goes into what you do, which is why for me you epitomise the sort of not even the typical obsessive, but there are lots of views, whether it be the best chocolatier in the country or somebody else sort of just trying to be the very best in whatever their niche is. I just find it incredible, the level of detail that not it's not that most people do it at all. You are the exception to the norm, but in the bit of hospitality, in the the side of it that I love, then I think it's brilliant. I was at Raymond Blanc's Four Seasons fairly recently, looking at their garden and what they grow for the restaurant, and you just think, wow, it's great. Life would be boring if it was run by the bean counters, and much as my finance director would yell at me, these are the conversations I play to him and go, look, some stuff we've just got to do because it's fun and because it's interesting and because we're learning, and surely learning and growth is the key reason for being on planet Earth and not more beans. So I'm with you, Hamish. It sounds really symbiotic, that relationship then with the cafe and how you work, in the same way I suppose that plants complement each other. It sounds like you found the sort of perfect partner to complement what you do. This is still very much an accessible cafe, is it? You can still rock up and have a cup of tea and a slice of cake. It's not a fine dining restaurant.
Completely. So it is exactly that. But just delivered to the lunch menu is still so relaxed. It's like a cafe, but you can still have your scone and coffee at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 10 o'clock, or come and sit down. Obviously, the long term goal is putting in bringing it, moving more. Definitely moving forward is to up that into a restaurant style of things, moving forward in the future, in hand with the distillery, and just make that whole relationship much more available, I suppose. Because
Yeah.
at the moment there's no heating, so you go into the glass house now. You do need to wrap up, and in the summer, oh my goodness, luckily we've got some outdoor, lots of outdoor space to sit. But it the stuff we need to do to make an all year round venue in that respect.
Yeah, you won't be bored. You've given so much sort of trust to this sort of philosophy, I suppose, of the journey and the adventure and being a passenger to what you do. What advice do you give other entrepreneurs or people who maybe come to you and have a chat or are looking at starting a business? With that quite a different philosophy, is there any nuggets of wisdom that you can give people who are thinking of starting an entrepreneurial journey?
I think the first thing is ignore anything I've said. Would be my number one thing. Uh, Definitely, I think there's a couple of things. One is not to be scared of space. We live in a world that is uh, unnatural, Western world, in my opinion. Whereas you don't always have to know where you're going to go, and it is petrifying letting go of that and trusting. So creating space for the next thing or the next journey is good, in my opinion. Always knowing where you're going to go and how you're going to deliver it doesn't allow you any space or freedom to let sometimes the magic come into your lives. So creating space is one, and then the other is imagination. Is opening your mind's eye to possibilities that probably I suppose other people don't see. And if it's done with a passion and a right direction, you're not going to go wrong.
Yeah, I think that's wise words. Talking a little bit about the future then, because we've got to draw to a close shortly because we're running out of time. You mentioned earlier that your dad had a whiskey business, and I know you were involved in that for a number of years. Can you see yourself producing your own whiskey in the future?
Funny enough, yeah, I so wanted to. I've done a lot of work when we're looking at building the distillery, but our footprint for our distillery, we could make a a single malt distillery on site. The problem is it's so small that you're paying the same price to produce 100,000 liters of alcohol whiskey of malt as you would 700,000. So our price point and everything was we were just going to be ridiculously, we'd just be out of the question for the investment that's needed. It's the same investment to produce that small amount as it would be to produce tenfold that. So and then I also realized that actually, well, hang on, to do that, I'd need to grow my own grain and dry it and everything else to make sure it was on the same storyline of what we're doing here. And when you start looking at it in that respect, it's like, no, don't lose the vision. The vision is about the botanics and the plants that make it. I'd love to work with a distiller and helping them grow, and a lot of them do grow their own barley, but again, it's done on that huge. I always say to kids, who wants a friend that takes from you all the time? That's not friendship. And that is what we do with modern agriculture. We take, take, take. And what we do put back is artificial poison. And so, there are farmers out there who are working hard. There is a change happening, slow, but there is a change happening of understanding that to run a farm is a balance. You need to have nature involved. You need to stop ruining the soil, with depleting its goodness, all of these sort of things. So I for me, was the idea of doing the whiskey would have to be, well, if I'm doing the whiskey, I'm going to need to grow the grain. And to grow the grain means you'd have to work with somebody who shares those same belief systems. Now, I'm just adding layer of difficulty at this point. So, and money, and which I don't have. So therefore it was right, get back. What are we about? Well, I'm passionate about the botanics and the herbs. Stick to that and really deliver the message about showing on a small scale how it is possible to employ so many people on such a small piece of land and using no chemicals. I would love to get my teeth into a project that would look at somebody who owns, a bigger, a farm that's growing barley and looking at ways of actually incorporating more wildlife opportunities and a way for people to walk around. Why not have a path that goes through the fields and it, hedging back, get the monoculture thing really. Anyway, yes, I'm diverse. Yeah,
I've gone on monoculture journeys. We had Geising Watson from Riverford Organic on the podcast a couple of times, and the Soil Association, Helen Browning from the Soil Association, has been on. So we've been down those rabbit holes a couple of times.
Yes, it's difficult not to get pulled in.
Start. you go off on an adventure. I'm going to have to draw to a close because I'm also in a home with homeschooling, and there's somebody else sort of waiting to do some work, and I've made them go quiet. But I feel like I could chat for another hour, Hamish. So maybe we can do this. In fact, I am genuinely coming up to Scotland in the summer for a couple of weeks, and so yeah, hopefully I'll get the opportunity to swing by in August, and hopefully you'll be up and running and bustling. Can people buy a lot of the stuff you've talked about, even your plant list? Can people have this sort of stuff delivered? Do you deliver a lot of the stuff you do nationally, or is it a pick-up only service? How does that work?
All the gins, the teas, the honeys, all of those sort of things. And we do these beautiful gin clubs, which is anyway, I won't do that. They're delivered nationally. The plants, I would love to. I haven't actually looked into it. We should look into how we're going to actually post them out. But we do a click and collect service for the plants. And really, you need to come here to buy those.
Okay.
It'd be a nice thing to be able to offer, but not at the moment.
Yeah, I've started getting a lot of stuff delivered by post plant. So there are some clever packaging solutions around. So where should people go, Hamish, if they want to follow your adventures? What's the website address, and is there a particular social media channel that they should go to?
I'm so bad at that.
I can find it if you don't know.
Yeah, well, we're actually, as the Old Curiosity Distillery is our website, and that's all going to change to Secret Garden Distillery. But if you go to the Old Curiosity Distillery, there's a blog, there's Instagram, and yes, Twitter and things, all on that. But I suppose that's the best one. And then the Secret Herb Garden is more about the cafe that Scott and Laura have, but it has got the plants there as well. And the way, so you could look at both. But obviously for the gyms and things, it's on our website.
Okay, perfect. Well, I will pop links up on the show notes that go with this episode as well, that point everybody in the right direction. But look, thank you so much for sharing your great story and your adventures so far. And I'm sure we'll get to touch base again. But more than anything, thanks for being a good egg and a good human, in the hospitality world, and doing stuff for what I would like to think are the right reasons. Like we say, not just the numbers. But really enjoyed chatting to you, Hamish. Thanks for sparing my time.
Yeah, pleasure, Mark. Thanks so much. Sorry for boring you.
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you. So, are you as in love with Hamish as I am? Do you want to sell up and go to work in a treehouse with an owl and spend your days doing something you love? Whatever the case, I hope you've learnt something and feel a smidgen more inspired now than you did an hour ago. I will pop links up, as always, to Hamish's business and website and social media via the show notes at humansofhospitality.co.uk. Or to save yourself going to look there each week, sign up for the newsletter on the website and they will appear in your inbox. And actually, as I said at the beginning, it looks pretty likely it's going to be another 2 weeks until the next show, since I need to knuckle down and get my restaurants and hotel reopened. But subscribe on your podcast player of choice and you won't miss the next release. Thanks for listening, you're awesome and I appreciate it. Cheers.